On January 26, 1945, Audie Murphy stood in a frozen field near Holtzwihr, France, commanding his unit of 18 men. German forces were advancing with 6 tanks and over 200 soldiers. Murphy ordered his men to fall back to the woods while he stayed to coordinate artillery strikes. He trusted his radio operator to stay with him and relay coordinates. The German tanks rolled closer. Murphy climbed onto a burning tank destroyer to get a better position. He grabbed the machine gun mounted on top. Then Murphy looked back. His radio operator was gone. The man had abandoned him and run to the woods with the others. Murphy was completely alone on top of a burning vehicle that could explode at any moment. German infantry came within 50 yards. Murphy started firing the machine gun. He called in artillery strikes on his own position, directing fire so close that shrapnel hit the tank around him. He killed dozens of German soldiers. For an hour, he held his position alone on that burning tank destroyer. When he finally ran out of ammunition, he climbed down and walked back to his lines. He had been wounded in the leg, but refused treatment until his men were safe. His actions stopped the German advance and saved his entire company. Desmond Doss climbed the cliffs of Hacksaw Ridge in Okinawa with his unit. He was a combat medic who refused to carry a weapon because of his religious beliefs. His fellow soldiers thought he was crazy. They reached the top of the ridge and immediately came under heavy Japanese fire. American soldiers fell everywhere. The unit tried to hold the position, but the Japanese counterattack was overwhelming. Officers ordered a retreat. Everyone scrambled back down the cliffs. Everyone except Doss. He stayed on top of that ridge alone. He moved through the chaos, finding wounded men and dragging them to the cliff edge. He tied ropes around them and lowered them down one by one. Japanese soldiers were everywhere. Bullets flew past him constantly. Grenades exploded around him. He kept working. He would find a wounded man, drag him to safety, lower him down, then go back for another. He did this over and over for 12 hours. He saved 75 men that night. When he finally climbed down himself, he was exhausted and wounded. His commanders tried to retreat from the ridge permanently, but Doss had saved so many soldiers that they had enough men to try again. 3 days later, they took Hacksaw Ridge. Doss received the Medal of Honor. He proved that courage didn't require a weapon. Thompson had been flying helicopter reconnaissance missions over Vietnam for months in early 1968. On March 16th, he was flying over a village called My Lai. He expected to see Viet Cong fighters. Instead, he saw something that made no sense. Bodies were scattered everywhere in the village. Women, children, elderly people. All dead. At first, he thought they were casualties from a firefight. He landed to mark wounded civilians for medical evacuation. Then he saw American soldiers herding villagers into a ditch. Thompson watched in horror as the soldiers opened fire on unarmed civilians. He realized what was happening. American forces weren't fighting enemy combatants. They were massacring innocent villagers. Thompson flew his helicopter between the soldiers and a group of civilians hiding in a bunker. He landed and told his crew to shoot any American soldier who tried to harm the civilians. He confronted the ground commander and demanded the killing stop. When the commander refused, Thompson radioed headquarters and reported a massacre in progress. He evacuated 11 villagers, including children. Over 500 civilians died that day at My Lai. Thompson's actions saved dozens more from being killed. His testimony later exposed the massacre and led to investigations. He was initially vilified by the military, but eventually received recognition for his moral courage. On December 26, 1944, Lieutenant Hiroo Onoda arrived on Lubang Island in the Philippines with orders to conduct guerrilla warfare against American forces. His commanding officer told him never to surrender and to keep fighting until ordered to stop. Onoda took those orders seriously. When Japan surrendered in 1945, Onoda didn't believe it. He thought it was American propaganda. He and 3 other soldiers retreated into the jungle to continue their mission. Onoda and his men developed elaborate security procedures to protect themselves. They moved camps constantly. They avoided all contact with locals. They ignored leaflets dropped by planes announcing the war was over. Their protective measures worked perfectly. They remained hidden and alive. But those same measures prevented them from learning the truth. Years passed. One by one, Onoda's companions died or surrendered. By 1972, Onoda was alone, still fighting a war that had ended 27 years earlier. In 1974, A Japanese student found him in the jungle. Onoda still refused to surrender until his former commanding officer flew to the island and personally relieved him of duty. Onoda finally emerged from the jungle on March 9, 1974. He had survived for 29 years because his protective measures were too effective. They had kept him alive, but trapped in a mission that no longer existed. During October 1918, Major Charles Whittlesey led his battalion deep into the Argonne forest in France. His orders were to advance regardless of the units on his flanks. He pushed forward aggressively with 554 men. They captured their objective and dug in to wait for support. But the units that were supposed to advance with them had been stopped by German resistance. Whittlesey's battalion was now isolated behind enemy lines. German forces surrounded them completely. They attacked from all sides. Whittlesey's men ran out of food and medical supplies. The Germans sent surrender demands. Whittlesey refused every time. Then American artillery began falling on their position. Someone had given the wrong coordinates. Whittlesey sent carrier pigeons with messages begging for the artillery to stop. The last pigeon, named Cher Ami, was shot but made it through with the message. The bombardment stopped. For 5 days, the battalion held their position against constant German attacks. They were down to 194 men when American forces finally broke through and rescued them on October 7th. Over half the battalion had been killed or wounded. Whittlesey became a national hero, but he was haunted by the deaths of his men. 2 years later, he disappeared from a ship and was presumed to have taken his own life. On March 6, 1940, Simo Haiha lay in a snow-covered forest in Finland, watching Soviet soldiers through his rifle scope. He had been fighting for 3 months in the Winter War. The Soviets had invaded Finland with overwhelming numbers. Haiha fought back as a sniper. He worked alone in temperatures that dropped to 40 below zero. He packed snow around himself for camouflage. He put snow in his mouth so his breath wouldn't give away his position. Over 98 days, he killed over 500 Soviet soldiers. The Soviets called him the White Death. They sent counter-snipers to hunt him. They sent entire artillery strikes to kill one man. Nothing worked. Then on March 6th, an explosive bullet hit Haiha in the face. Half his jaw was blown away. His fellow soldiers found him and dragged him to safety. They didn't think he would survive. He fell into a coma. The Winter War ended on March 13th while Haiha was still unconscious. He woke up on March 13th, the same day the peace treaty was signed. His face was horribly disfigured. Doctors had to reconstruct his jaw. He spent over a year recovering. Against all odds, Haiha lived. He survived until 2002, dying at age 96. He remains the deadliest sniper in military history. When asked about his incredible accuracy, he simply said he practiced a lot.